Where we last left off was this settings page. We did the tabs so we can start filling out all this UI now with stuff we like. But one of the main benefits of Avalonia is the ability to be fully cross-platform. And right now all we have is desktop apps. So this app can run in Windows, Mac and Linux at the minute, and we're only running in Windows. Now admittedly this app is probably only ever going to be specifically for Windows, but we might as well make it work in, say, the browser, and let's start adding some cross-platform applications to this. Instead of just making a new application altogether that supports all the cross-platform apps, I think it's important you see and understand how to convert an existing app from the normal template into something that can support the browser and exactly how this is all working. So let's just take a look at how to do that. So first we'll just close this down, and what we can do to get a browser working is we'll do new solution, and we just want to create down here this cross-platform app. So the one we made was a .NET app. We've added the MVVM stuff to it manually, but now what we want to do is create a cross-platform app just to see what's going on and what the differences are. This is also important to do to make sure your machine is working correctly by default, which I can almost guarantee you it won't without installing some things. So we've made a new app, and we can see once everything builds, we'll just press Ctrl Shift and B to build the application. This will download and install all kinds of things for like Android. If you have iOS set up somehow, this will load, but by default it won't be. And it will download all of dependencies for all these solutions. So it'll just take a minute. It normally takes, literally 1 or 2 minutes to do this. And now it's built successfully. We don't care about Android, so let's just right click and unload that for now. We don't care about iOS, so we'll unload that as well. But we do want to see the desktop and the browser working. One thing you'll notice at the top now, you've got a drop down, and you have all these options here. You've got the iOS, Android, desktop and browser. We'll click the desktop, click the run, and let's just make sure this works still. So this is a demo app, which you'd expect to work, and it says welcome to Avalonia. Next up is click the drop down and select the browser. And click run on this, or F5 to debug. And what will happen is if it's going to work, it's going to open this and you'll see welcome to Avalonia. Now when it initially loads, you'll see powered by Avalonia, and then it loads. I can almost guarantee that half of you will find this won't work by default. What you'll either get is when you press F5 to run this, it will open up a dialog complaining about your browser. If you click File and Settings, and just type in browser in the top search, you'll see there's this web browser and preview option here in tools. You want to change the option here to first listed and make sure that whichever browser you're selecting is a Chrome-based browser, so Edge is a Chrome-based browser. If I change this to default like it would normally be, and I went to run this browser, this is the error dialog you're going to get popping up, and it just doesn't understand how to run the project. Now it looks all confusing, there's tons of applications and it says that profiles aren't set up. Ultimately all it's saying to do is scroll down to here, change the browser to say Edge and run. So you can do it that way as a one-off, or you can change it in the settings page by going up to here, settings, browsers, and changing it to the default one that you want. The next issue you might have is when you run the browser, it will pop up but it won't load past the splash screen. So that powered by Avalonia will just sit there hanging. If we press F12, you'll probably have a console error here complaining that Avalonia.js doesn't exist. And that's because it doesn't install the WebAssembly compilation tools by default. To do that, you can either come down to here and click on Terminal to load in a PowerShell. And then in here, you type .NET workload install wasm-tools. And what this will do is pull in these WASM tools and run an install to set up everything for you. And this is because the Avalonia browser uses WebAssembly and compiles code to run in the browser directly. If you don't have this, you'll get stuck on the blue splash screen. This will take about 5 or 10 minutes to load. Once that's done, you may still get issues. And if you do, just press on any of these, say the desktop and the browser, and press F4 in Rider, or right-click Edit and edit the CS proj file. And whatever target framework is here, so you can see it's 9 in my instance, or for the browser, it's 9-browser. you want to make sure you actually have the SDK installed for this version of .NET. To do that, again, in this option down here, you can type .NET-info, and then you'll see all the information about your .NET that's installed. You can see the runtimes are installed for all of them, 789, 789, so they're all fine. And in the SDKs, I just have 9. So you want to make sure, if you don't have the .NET SDK that's matched here, either change this to 8 or 9, I'd prefer just updating to 9, and go ahead and download the .NET SDK 9. Finally, if you created this project and it wasn't 9 and it was 8, then you're currently running on some old Avalonia templates. So the best thing to do for that is just reinstall the templates so they're up to date. And to do that, again, in the command line, you do .NET new install avalonia.templates. And this will just repull the templates. You can see on mine, if we scroll up, it says I've already got 11.2.1.1, but if you don't, it will reinstall them. If it's done the update, you then want to close down your Visual Studio or Rider, delete the project we just made, and remake it from the templates. That should, if everything's been done right, get you to the point where you can now just run the browser and see it fully load and say, welcome to Avalonia. So you can see now it's showing WASM was getting ready for the first time then because we reinstalled the tools. And then it loads, and this is one other thing you might see. I pressed F5 this time instead of the run button. This is a bug for me that doesn't seem to happen for everybody. But if you just see a white screen, just resize slightly and it forces a redraw. And that's just something to do with the debugging at the minute. If I say, for example, don't debug and just click run, you won't come across that error. It's just going to open up a browser and instantly load. So this is the point you want to get to before we go further. And then we know that your machine is now going to work for Avalonia and the browser. Next, what we want to do is convert our batch process application from this single project into this new setup where we have all of our code, or 90% of our code, in this kind of universal application. But then we have a .desktop, .browser, and in future we can add mobile. To do that, all we need to do is really take a look at the differences. So the desktop, if we go in, it only has 2 files. It's the app.manifest and the program.cs file. If we compare that to the ones we've got, you can see there's literally no difference. So all we have to do for that then is create a new project. And because we don't really have an option here, these are just going to be full applications. We can either make a full application and delete all the extras. So in order to convert our batch process application into this layout, we want to just close everything down first, and we want to restructure the folder a little bit. So in the source of our batch process here, at the minute we have the solution and the project in the same folder. We want to keep the solution at the top level and move the subproject in. And if we open this example applications folder, you'll see what we're trying to recreate. It has the solution at the top, and then it has a folder with everything else inside. Because this wants to pretty much stay, we'll just make a new folder, call it batch process 3, select everything except that folder, move it into the subfolder. We'll now go inside of here, get the solution and the solution settings, cut them and paste them outside. We'll have to re-add this path when we open the solution, but that's no problem. We then want to copy this CSproj file, because we're just going to use this as a template, cut up a folder, and we're going to duplicate ultimately this desktop here. So we'll right click, make a new folder, call it batch process 3.desktop, paste in the solution, rename it to batch process 3.desktop, and we have the basic structure here. We can move out the program and app manifest. So we're just going to cut them out of there, place them into here. And now we should be good to reopen the solution, and let's just relink all these files. So the first thing is, this is going to be missing. Let's just delete it. Just right click, edit, delete. And now in the empty solution, right click, add existing project. We'll go into the batch process CSproj, re-add this. And then we'll just exclude the folders from Windows Defender. Now we have this project back in, ignore all the red for now. Right click, add existing project. And we're going to add the second project we have as well, which is in the desktop folder called CSproj. We want to check the example project in the desktop. by clicking the desktop project and pressing F4 to edit the CS project. And we mentioned there's no real differences between the actual files inside. However, if we look at the references compared to our references, we have version numbers on everything we've referenced. Whereas in the new template, they remove the version numbers, and instead what they do is in the top level folder, so if we open the top level folder, they add this directories.packages.props, and if we take a look at that, it specifies then this way of keeping package reference numbers in sync. So we want to use this. Ultimately, we could remake this file, but we're just going to copy this file over as well. So we want to nick this directories.packages.props from the example app, open up the top level solution in Explorer, and paste that in there as well. And now what we can do is everywhere we see a version, just delete the version. And this solutions prop file is going to choose the version for us. If we don't do this, then things won't compile without us manually updating version numbers everywhere we go. So this is a good thing to do. If you don't have a version number for some things, so if we just open that props file, you can see in here we've got the community framework, but we don't actually have this dependency injection in here. So we can copy this, paste it in here, copy and paste another line so the syntax is right, cut the name into here, and cut the version into here. And then get rid of the line below, and now that's in there as well. With all of those removed, let's just double check there's no other versions in there. And nothing else seems different. So that means this project should be okay. But what it does is it references the new core project. So this desktop project needs to reference this batch process. We can do that in this file and just add the package reference. We can add it using the UI to add a reference to this package. Or as you can see, they just make a project reference and include the path. So we could just copy the project reference ourselves. They typically put it at the bottom of the file, so we'll just do the same. Chuck it at the bottom. This will want to go up a folder, out of the desktop folder, into this top folder. Go into a folder called batch process 3. And then this is called batch process 3.cs project. So that will now add a link from this to this. And you can see if you go into dependencies, .NET, projects, you can see it's got this reference. So now we've got the reference to that project file. The only other thing we'll do is in the program, we'll change this namespace now from batch process 3 to .desktop, just so it matches the actual new name of the project. The assembly info is updated already correctly, and we can see this desktop project, because we copy and pasted it from this one, still has all of the things like the assets and fonts, which we don't want. So again, let's just remove all them. We don't actually want any of these assets or fonts. We'll just delete them all. And we don't want these views. So our final project will just look like this. It's likely that some of these dependencies aren't needed either. And based on the fact that the only thing used here is Avalonia Desktop, what we can do is try and do exactly that and just remove every other dependency. The last thing we want to do now is convert what was the desktop app down into this kind of core application. So let's start with the project file again. Click on here, press F4, and we want to see the difference between this and this project's settings. I'll just drag and drop the CS proj file into the batch process one so we can do a much quicker side-by-side. And you'll see the first thing to notice is the output type WinExe is simply not present. So we'll delete that. Next, this is targeting .NET 8. We want to target .NET 9. That's just a quick update because we've got .NET 9 on the system now. So I'm going to update both to .NET 9. We have nullables the same. This built-in interop seems to be missing now, so I'm just going to remove that, just to keep it up with the latest Avalonia templates. This Avalonia manifest file is not needed because that's now in the desktop app. Then we have our references, which need all the version numbers removing, like the one we copy and pasted. These will all get picked up by that file we copied to the root of the solution. And I think we may have left the version number in that diagnostics actually on the other file. Let's just go double check the desktop. No, we didn't. That's gone. That's fine. All these assets can stay because they are actually in this project. And then the views are in as well. And comparing this, there seems no other difference. So all we've had to do for this one is to remove the WinExe and remove the version numbers from here. That will now make this into almost effectively a class library and not an executable. And now you can see at the top right, the drop down, this batch process 3 is no longer executable. So we'll do ... and delete to just even remove that as an option. And now the only option currently is the desktop. So let's see if this runs. We've likely got to do some more work first. And you can see there now, we've now got a problem with SVG image. So let's maybe just manage NuGet packages and update everything. Because we have updated to .NET 9, so maybe these packages are simply not right. If everything is compiling, let's see if it actually runs. So I'll just press F5 to try and run the project. And there we go. We hopefully still have, an app that runs the same. So all we've had to do all that for is because we didn't start a new solution as a cross-platform app. And these two templates are currently not the same as the cross-platform. Now you can see there's no reason why this layout, this core app with a .desktop, couldn't be the default template for these applications. And then we wouldn't have to do any of this, and adding a browser would be a one-click process. So this is probably something that we'd ideally like to see Avalonia do, is update the project templates for these two, which are desktop templates ultimately for the 3 desktops, into this kind of layout. All we've done now is made this the same as the cross-platform solution, but without the browser, the Android and the iOS, so that they are now in the exact same kind of layout and structure as the more updated project template. The last step then now is to add this browser. And again, because if you go to the solution and click Add New Project, there's no templates for creating just a browser, as far as I can see. There's no kind of Avalonia template. The only place you can currently pull it in is through the entire cross-platform solution template. So the only option we have is to open again this example folder and copy. We'll just copy this entire folder. Open up the batch process folder and paste it in. Rename it to batch process 3.browser. We'll go in, rename the solution to the same. We can delete the temporary build files, and then we're dealing with these. If we go to the solution, add existing project, now add this new browser solution. We'll just have to go through the files and make sure the namespaces and things are right, and that this has got a reference to this project. And instead of doing that in this F4 here, which is where we would have done it before, and change this reference, we can just simply right-click on the dependencies part, click References, and we want to reference this core project here, and click OK. Now if we press F4 into here, you can see it's added that for us, and we can go ahead and delete this reference we're not using. And that's now what our browser template looks like. The CS_proj file is a WebAssembly type. Let's just browse through what the browser version does. We have assembly info. There's nothing to edit there. Launch conditions. This is again just the name here that will appear up here. So this is where we'll get, you see, Avalonia app1.browser there. We can rename this to batch process 3.browser. The web root has some CS icons and a template, and this is that blue screen that you see here that you could edit, so we don't need to edit anything there. This title though in the HTML, we might as well get matching our namespace. This can be anything, but again, we'll just set it up like it was made with the template. The JavaScript file, again, you can see nothing in here to edit specific to the namespace. The program file, if we expand the using, you can see we've got a namespace here that we don't need, so we'll cut that out of the way. On the app, we'll do Control Dot, and it will re-add the correct namespace for us. And again, there's nothing else to add here. And then the template, you can see again, nothing to add there. So that now should have added the browser project to our solution. And if we build, let's see if everything builds. Now it's all built apparently. So let's change this drop down, go to the browser here and see if we can run. You can see it's trying to default to all these settings. So we've got to change this drop down to here, change this to Edge, and let's try and run that. And then it starts up. And look at the fact that we're locked on this blue screen. So this is where something's going wrong. Press F12, and you can see here now we have a crash. One or more errors occurred in the browser windowing platform. Doesn't really give us that much info. So let's just take a look at what could have gone wrong. We'll do that by comparing these two again. We know this is the same because we just copied this browser over. So we know the browser app should be fine. So we must be missing some other change in the core that's different than our core here. Let's start in the app where it begins. We can see it has all the same code. We have dependency injection. And then we see here we have a desktop app. And in the sample code, it's got the desktop app, but it's also got a single view platform that we don't have. So we need to add this into ours. Let's just copy the else if, paste it in here, and let's just take a quick look as well. You can see the desktop creates a main window with a main window view model, which is ultimately what we do, but we have ours called main view and main view model. And then otherwise it makes something called a main view. So this is where you have to be careful. This is a main window, that ours is actually called a main view. But then here there is a main view. So if we look in their views, there is actually a main view and a main window. And these are two different things, and we've got ours named exactly the same. So we've got a main view that is a window, whereas they've got a main window that is a window, and a main view that's a user control. So what we need to do is take this main view. We want to change it from a window to a user control. And in order to do that, let's just do a new Avalonia user control. We'll call this main view 2 for the minute. And then we'll go into the main view, which is our window. We'll cut everything out. So we want to cut all of this out and leave just the window there. Go into main view 2 and paste this in. And then anything that was in the window here, we need to move over to the user control. That makes sense. So for that, we have the view model namespace, the view namespace, the data type. Cut all those out, paste them in here. And there's some other problem in here. We have some code behind. So on the code behind of the other class, you can see we just had this example code here. So we want to take this code behind from the main view, which is going to become the window, and paste it into the code behind of the actual main view. Control dot on this to import the right namespace. And now you can see it finds that. So there's no problem there. Let's just try and now rename main view. So we'll press F2 on the XAML, call this main window. And then on the main view 2, press F2, rename this back to main view. So now we have what was our main window now called main view, and it's now a user control. And what was the entire main window before is now just an empty window. In that case then, in the window, you can see all they then do is literally use the user control as the only item inside the window. So we'll do the same thing. And we don't want the views, it's in the same folder. So we'll just make up here an XML namespace. Call this one local because it's the same folder we're currently in. And this will be batch process 3.views because we are in this folder, so really it's the local view. Give that the namespace local and main view. And now that should be a main window that hosts a main view, which is exactly like the example cross-platform app. The last step then I'm hoping is back to the app. Find here, we now have a main window with a main window view model. And then this wanted to be a main view, if you remember from the example. was a main window with a main window view. And then in this case, this was a main view, but with the same view model. So you're just changing the main view from a main window to a main view. So when it's a desktop, it's a main window. When it's a single page view, it's a main view. If that's right, it should still compile. And now let's press F5. And that's much better. It's running. Powered by Avalonia. And hopefully, you can see initializing debugger down here. This might start. Unfortunately, looks like we've still got some other problem. We don't have debugging. It's not really telling us anything useful here. And what I finally figured out from digging around quite a while is that this is causing the random crash in the browser. I've just noticed we've got the wrong version of Skier. So it doesn't show in the desktop, but it shows in the browser just as a crash. So if we update that and rebuild to fetch the new NuGet packages and rerun in the browser, let's just see if this works. There we go, white screen, and there we have it. So that's now the application running in the browser. Now you can see it responds and resizes to how we expected it to, and everything seems to work the same. But as mentioned, this isn't really designed for the web, so it's more about how to get your application building for web, should you want to. But you can see things like the responsiveness we'd have to work on to get it to actually look good in the web for now. But at least you've seen how to manually convert and add a browser project. You can see things like clicking the action isn't working, and we don't get any debuggability, but you can see from just running in the browser, letting it load, and then as you click this button, for example, it then crashes, but with no debugging. So something about the browsers probably don't support at the minute the dependency injection, or maybe this isn't running the same. I know it doesn't currently support multiple threads either, so it's very limited. But for our purposes, we will now just keep the browser in there, but unload it, so we're not wasting debug cycles every time we want to build. In the future, we'll probably come back and actually update this browser to attempt to make the application run there. But for now, we just simply have the template ready to go. So that's it for this one, guys. I'll catch you in the next.